Hey, and we're back. We're in the shop again with Ivan2104, and usually when we're here, it's for optional performance upgrades or appearance stuff that we want to do. But that's not the case today, is it, Shawn?
No, unfortunately not. A couple days ago, the rad started leaking, and it pisses coolant as soon as it gets warm. So we're going to demonstrate how to fix it by soldering the leak up without taking it to a rad shop or doing anything special or fancy.
Today's special assistance is brought to you by Jesse, who is not Jesse, he's just Jesse.
So we're just marking the hinges so that when we take the hood off, we can put it back in the same spot. The only reason the hood's coming off is because the downfall of side mount mirrors is it's a pain to work on the engine without knocking them all over the place. Okay, so with the hood off and the overflow hose taken out, we can get a look at the crack. It's a little hard to tell, but it runs all the way around the upper spout for the return rad hose. If you wiggle it, you can see where it actually pulls right apart. So we're going to pull the rad, clean everything up, remove all the old solder, and resolder it and fix the crack. Okay, so now that we have the electric fan out, we just got to drain the radiator, and to do that on these, you have to take the electric fan temperature sensor out. It's the little sensor that engages the fan when it gets hot. You just break that free, thread it out, and then you drain the system that way. I've already broken it loose. It's this sensor right down in here. And then once it's loose, you just thread it out until coolant starts coming. That little guy right there. Once that dries, we'll undo some hoses and then we'll lift the rad out to fix it. There she blows. And now my alternator will never work right again. Sadly, that's not that far off. That's what happened to Neva last time.
Just working on the fan shroud and freshening that up so it doesn't rust out, and it looks a little nicer.
Now we have the rad out and we're just in the process of cleaning everything up. And if you come in close and look, you can see the crack that's in around the upper neck spout. And we're going to clean that up a bit, try and get most of the old solder out. And by doing that, we're just going to use this micro torch, get in here close. We have a wire brush that we're also going to use. Try and get it warm, get it relatively hot, enough that the solder starts to melt. And then wire brush it out. And we'll do that a couple times till we get everything cleaned out that we can. And then we will flux it and get in there and put new solder in and hopefully seal this up. Now part of the reason I'm using the small torch is I don't want to use the big torch and put a whole bunch of heat in here and unsolder the main seam in my tank. So I'm just using localized heat to try and get most of the old solder out of small areas, and then we're going to patch it in little pieces as we go. There, that's what we want, to see the big chunks come out. And we can fix this by soldering it, no problems, because this is how they're actually put together and installed at the factory. Brass tanks are soldered together, so this is no different than any rad shop would do that you would take it to fix, or the way it was originally built. And when we're all done and paint this up, no one will ever be the wiser of what happened. Also trying not to breathe in the burning coolant fumes. It's not really good for you. Okay, so we're going to get ready to solder this rad up, but we're going to take a minute to talk about different types of solder and different types of fluxes. There's a couple different types. If you look at here, it says solder, rosin, that's tin at 30%, lead at 70%. For something like this, you want to do higher lead content than tin. Lead being a little more flexible and it's a little more bonding, sticks better. Higher tin is sort of what's used more for electrical and stuff like that. Now, there's also, you can get solid core solder, or you can also get a hollow core solder that has either rosin flux or an acid flux. For this, we're going to use the rosin. Rosin's used for copper and brass type surfaces. Acid flux style is used for more steel, tin, everything else, as well as copper and brass. It's just not really needed for this. You can also get two different types of flux straight. You can get your tinning flux, which is used for tight joints, and as well as electrical or anything that's highly corrosive that's not copper or brass. Copper or brass, you want just good old solder acid flux. What's here in my hands is the regular flux. Use a brush to install it because the stuff is corrosive. It doesn't do much on sealed skin, but if you have a cut, it will let you know very quickly that you have a cut. All you do is you just brush it in all around. You use quite generously. Too much is not enough sometimes. The more you have, the better it is, because you want to have a nice, good, clean surface to solder to. So don't be afraid of it. You can't hurt nothing by putting too much on. Once you have it on, then get a little micro torch. And I'm using just a micro torch because I want to localize the heat to a specific area. I do not want to unsolder this seam. So you just get her in, get her hot. And that acid solder, as it gets hot, will burn out any contaminants. And it'll clean the surface up and get it prepped and ready for soldering. And you really shouldn't breathe this stuff in. Okay, now we're ready to apply solder. We're just heating up the area, trying to get the whole area hot. And once we get it hot enough that the solder will start to melt, we're going to try and get it to flow in. Be careful of the spitting lead. You apply a bit, then you apply some heat, get her to flow in. And once it flows in, it'll smooth out a bit. And it looks all nice and proper and makes it look like you almost know what you're doing. It's actually not a whole lot off of doing brazing or also doing TIG welding. Surprisingly, all similar process used to achieve the same end result, which is just using a metal to fill a void and seal something up. Trickiest bit is getting it hot enough that it wants to flow in. And if you didn't use a flux and get this clean, it wouldn't flow. And it wouldn't seal. And it's the easiest way to tell if it's not clean enough. And right there we had a little bit of contaminant because it bubbled out. But there you can watch her sort of flow in. Now we'll let that cool down, and then we should be able to wire brush it clean and see how it sits. Okay, so after some cleanup on the soldered joint, as you see, it's flowed in pretty good, kind of all blended together. It's not as blended together in there as well as I'd like, but I am not putting any more heat in there. In deep, it's actually just fine. It's more the aesthetics. It looks a little bad. But it's all soldered in, should no longer leak, give us any problems, and it's a lot cheaper than buying a new radiator. Okay, so the part that we removed earlier to drain the rad is this right here, and this is the thermostatic switch that turns the electric fan off and on. It has power that goes into it, and normally this is in a closed or in an open state, so power cannot transfer through, and your engine runs. When it comes up to temperature and this gets hot enough, it triggers a little switch inside that'll close the loop, sends power back out to the relay, and turns the electric fan on. We're just installing this back in now because we removed it to drain the radiator. Well, we have the rad here. It's all cleaned up and soldered together, painted. Makes it look good as brand new almost. We just have to install it now. Very important to note that when dealing with a bottom thermostat radiator and setup, you have to fill the block up first before you fill the rad through the upper rad hose. So you just pour it in until it fills up there, then you put your rad hose on, then fill your radiator. There's no point in filling your radiator first because you'll just run out the spigot here at the top that we soldered up. So you fill the block first, then fill the rad. Otherwise you get a big airlock and it will not push it out and you'll overheat and blow crap up. It's the gurgles of happiness. What we're doing here is we just fire it up, let it run, bring the engine up to temperature so that we can circulate the coolant through and push all the air out. It'll take about 10 minutes of running until it gets warm enough. On something with the electric fan, you just wait till the fan kicks in. Once the fan kicks in, you know it's hot enough that the thermostat has opened. Well, now the engine has come up to temperature, and the easiest ways to tell with that is three things, besides the steam that's coming off of the rad from where it used to leak. One is the upper rad hose is hot, and if you have a Lada Niva that doesn't have an electric fan, that's the easiest way to tell. You just put your hand on the upper rad hose, and once the upper rad hose has come up to hot, quite hot, you'll know that the thermostat is open and it's circulated fluid through. Then you can wait till it to cool down, pull your rad cap off, and check your fluid levels. Also, on anything with an electric fan, as stated before, if the fan kicks in and then goes through a cycle and shuts off, you know that she's also been up to temperature. And the third one is you start to get air pushing out through into the degas bottle. Once them three things have happened on this, it has been up to temperature, and then you let it cool back down and then check your coolant level. Never pull the rad cap off with it hot. You can get steam or hot coolant come out and hit you in the face. It has happened before, to me. Once this engine has cooled down, we will check the coolant levels and then it'll be good. The engine is now cooled down to a point where we can remove the rad cap. It does need to be topped up a little bit, as they all will, but other than that, top the coolant level up, and we still have to put a hood on, but that doesn't really matter for this. That's how you fix a radiator in one of these, as long as it has a brass style rad. And other than that, we're done. We're good to go. And as always, like, share, and subscribe.